everyone! Today's video is going to be slightly different. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite games while drawing fan art for it. Today's theme is Ace Attorney. I've loved Ace Attorney for a while now, and I've been itching to make some rendered fan art as well as a video geeking out about it. For those who don't know, Ace Attorney is a video game / visual novel where you play as Phoenix Wright, a defense attorney. Your job? Proving your client's innocence while figuring out who actually committed the crime. Because for some reason, if you can't point out the real culprit, the judge will still say you're guilty, even though you proved it to be physically impossible. During the game, you meet the zaniest characters with the funniest names, and come across multiple crime scene investigations, all just to end up in court examining evidence, cross-examining the witnesses, and poking holes in their testimonies, as well as screaming "Objection! Hold it!" and "Take that!" into the faces of our mostly charming, but sometimes physically abusive prosecutors. Ace Attorney was created by Shoujo and was developed by none other than Capcom. Yes, that Capcom. For most people, Capcom is the creator of Resident Evil, but to me, their best work will always be Ace Attorney. And it was first released back in 2001 for the Game Boy Advance, I believe. Now, Ace Attorney is comprised of the main trilogy, Ace Attorney, Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations, a sequel trilogy with Apollo Justice, Dual Destinies, and Spirit of Justice, and a few spin-off games. The Great Ace Attorney series, following Phoenix's ancestor, and Miles Edgeworth Investigations, following our favorite prosecutor Edgeworth. The Investigation series is also finally being ported to Nintendo Switch and PC, as well as having the second game of the series finally localized in the West. And those games were announced a couple weeks back, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this video. And finally, we also have a crossover game with Professor Layton. Ace Attorney also received an anime adaptation. The anime is pretty fun, but I still prefer the game for the simple fact that in the anime, Phoenix seems to be a bit more competent than he actually is in the game. It also received a manga adaptation, a live-action movie, CD dramas, stage plays, and musicals. Each and every one of them with their iconic and outlandishly silly moments. It's a really fun series. I feel like we can't have an Ace Attorney video without mentioning how crazy the localization is. You see, because it was first released in 2001, America was still in their "let's pretend this happens in America" phase of localization. So, here in the West, Phoenix Wright happens in California, I believe. The problem with that is that there are a few things and a few locations that are clearly Japanese. For example, Maya Fey is a spirit medium that's from a very traditionally Japanese village, and when we visit that village and her family home, we see scrolls hanging on the walls, futons, kanji everywhere, as well as tatami floors and magatamas. How did the localization team deal with that? Well, call it ancient texts, and let's leave it at that. Maya loves ramen. Well, we can't have that. Western children in the early 2000s have no idea what that is. But they know what a burger is. So in the West, Maya loves burgers. It's just bonkers, and it became a meme in the community. I heard a lot of people say that Ace Attorney doesn't happen in America nor Japan, but in a weird combination of both, the lovingly named Japanifornia. Aside from that, the localization also changed the name of all the characters. But in this specific case, I believe that the localization made a good call. The names had to be translated. You see, Ace Attorney loves puns, and all the characters are named after puns, so you can easily understand why they had to adapt the names. My favorite names are Look At Me, Frank Saw It, Trucy Wright, Will Powers, Lotta Hart. You get the picture. Every name is a joke or a reference of some sort. Even when adapting Ace Attorney Chronicles, for copyright reasons, they had to change Sherlock Holmes to Herlock Sholmes. Just amazing. It's so dumb, but I love it so much. And since we're on the topic of characters, let's talk about some of them, shall we? Phoenix Wright, or Nick, is our playable character for the majority of the series. and he is a guy that decided to be a defense attorney at around 9 years old, when he was accused of stealing a classmate's lunch money, only to be defended by his soon-to-be best friends Larry and, more importantly, Miles Edgeworth. Miles stood up for Phoenix and argued that since they had no evidence, they couldn't accuse Phoenix of such a thing. Eventually, Phoenix and Edgeworth lost contact, and Phoenix decided to follow a career in law as a way to see his friend again. Phoenix is very sassy, and his attitude and commentary during the games is pretty refreshing, since he kinda is the most normal member of the cast. Despite being pretty incompetent at his job and, well, stealing evidence every now and then, Phoenix still manages to win almost every case that comes to him. That's because he strongly believes in his client's innocence. Eventually, he always seems to find holes in the witness's testimony, and he also bluffs a lot, sometimes starting arguments without really knowing where he's going with it. He's more than an ace attorney, he is an incredibly lucky attorney. Maya Fey is Phoenix's unofficial assistant, and she's 16 in the beginning of the series. She's also a spirit medium in training and the heir to the Fey clan and the future master of the Kurain channeling technique. She's also Mia Fey, Phoenix's mentor, younger sister. She's a silly Billy. She's very energetic, optimistic, and a go-getter. She also does a lot of weird things, like, for example, using a shower head to create her very own waterfall training session. Maya is almost always with us, and her dynamic with Phoenix is great. They pretty much act like siblings most of the time, and that's pretty fun. Some characters in the game, and I'm pretty sure the developers, at least at first, shipped Maya and Phoenix, but that ship was never all that popular with the fans. I personally don't like the ship, mainly because of their age gap and because I feel like their dynamic is more platonic than anything else. Maya brings in a lot of comedy to the series. She bounces off Nick's sometimes pessimistic outlook pretty well. I also feel like they take turns being silly. I mean, Maya is the silly one in my opinion, but Nick has some outrageous moments of his own. Only this guy can cross-examine a parrot with a straight face and still win the case. Maya is also a meme in the community because of how many times she is accused of murder. Like, man, she's been accused at least 3 times. This girl needs a new hobby. Miles Edgeworth is the main prosecutor in the series and the only one that seems to appear in almost every game. He's uptight, calm, cold, and generally aloof, but he also has his funny moments. He's Mr. Updated Autopsy Report, Mr. Saddled with Unnecessary Feelings, and he's also the main focus of the first game because of his involvement in the DL6 incident. His dad was also an attorney, and he was part of the reason Miles defended Phoenix in the class trial. I feel like it was unintentional, at least at first, but they actually set up a pretty interesting dynamic between Phoenix and Edgeworth. They definitely go from friends to rivals to friends again, and if you ask most people in the fandom, they are definitely made for each other. I mean, Phoenix went to law school just to see Edgeworth again, and I know they kinda tried to retcon that in the third game, but still, I feel like Edgeworth was still the main reason. And in some of the later games, there are some exchanges between the two of them that will make anyone raise an eyebrow. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm a fan, they're pretty cute together. A less important character, but I still want to talk about him, Dick Gumshoe, is a detective in all the cases in the main trilogy. He works with Edgeworth and he does the arresting and investigating. Sorta. You see, Gumshoe, despite being a good-natured person and being very lovable, it's undeniable that he is very dumb and very incompetent in his job. Like, if you think Phoenix is incompetent, Gumshoe is incompetent. He basically arrests the first person he sees in the crime scenes with little to no investigative work. He's also really loyal, so he would do anything to help out the ones he works with, i.e. Edgeworth, mostly Edgeworth anyway. But he also saved us a handful of times, despite technically not being on our side. His salary is also a reoccurring joke during the main trilogy since Edgeworth, and I think Francisca did that too, often threatened Gumshoe with salary cuts due to his incompetence. At some point it kinda becomes sad because I believe they are in fact making salary cuts because Gumshoe comments that he barely has money to pay for instant noodles. As you can see, Gumshoe ends up being the butt of the joke. But then again, he really is incompetent. I mean, he offered to give a child a gun to cheer her up. Thankfully, Phoenix stopped him, but still. He's a really fun character. I like him so much that I actually made a 3D model of him. I need to find the file in my hard drives, but if I find it, it'll appear on screen right now. I could go on about Ace Attorney characters forever, but unfortunately I don't have all the time in the world. Take these descriptions as a sneak peek into the character writing in the series, and believe when I say that the characters, even the one-off ones, really steal the show. When it comes to the gameplay, it's a visual novel, so most of the gameplay is actually just reading. You get to explore the environments by clicking everywhere. You really only have to do it when investigating. But even if you do it early on in the chapter, you can be rewarded with pretty funny interactions between characters, as well as starting to take notice of things that might become important later on. During case trials is where you have the most gameplay and where you have to pay the most attention because of the witness's testimony, and it's also where you get some of the evidence as well. You always have to make sure you're not overlooking anything. Even so, sometimes you have to make some leaps of logic to get to where the game wants you to go, and sometimes you actually realize what's going on a little bit too soon, but that's not big of a deal. Ace Attorney doesn't have multiple endings nor anything like that, the story is pretty linear, but that's also not the point of the game. The fun part is actually getting the evidence and piecing together who did it as well as how they did it, and believe me, sometimes the how is more interesting than anything else. All the characters have pretty creative character designs. Some of them are pretty wild, to be honest, but somehow it still works. I think Phoenix has the most plain design, although he gets some interesting feats every now and then. The animations are pretty fun, even when the sprites were in pixel art. In the early days, they had to be pretty creative because of the cartridge size limitation, often splicing up the models and putting them on top of each other in-game. Still, they were able to make incredible and smooth animations, as well as very creative reactions that went well with each character's overall theme. Some of the cornered animations are the most satisfying ones, and they can be really surprising with how creative they end up being. The fandom is also pretty fun. It's a very memey fandom, since the series are so memeable. Some popular memes are the updated autopsy report that Miles brings to court in the first case we face him, Maya's burger obsession, the fact that we can present our attorney's badge literally to anyone at any time, the stepladder ladder debate, Edgeworth's quote-unquote unnecessary feelings towards Phoenix, and so on and so on. I've also never encountered too much toxicity in the fandom, although to be fair I don't tend to interact directly with other fans. This series is a safe bet if you like visual novels and courtroom dramas. You might also enjoy it if you like the Zero Escape series, AI The Somnium Files, and of course Danganronpa. Personally, before I was an Ace Attorney fan, I was a pretty big Danganronpa fan, and if you guys end up wanting it, I can make a video like this for Danganronpa as well. Still, right now, if you were to ask me which series I like the most, I'd have to say Ace Attorney, since the tone is overall lighter and more comedic. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video. If you wanna see more stuff from me, I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at momopurin_chan and on Kara at momopurin. Thank you so much, and until next time, bye!